Saints Row, from Volition and Deep Silver, is a reboot of the franchise that's been around for more than 15 years at this point. Now, Saints Row is known for the over-the-top action, intrigue, and increasingly its goofiness. The reboot, however, seemed to rather tone down these elements during the initial marketing push. Now that we've had our hands on it, the question is, does it live up to the legacy of its predecessors? Players in Saints Row take on the role of the boss, or rather their own boss character that they create and customize at the start of the game. The character creator allows you to take a preset and then run wild with it with various customization options. There's plenty to choose from, and you could quite literally spend up to an hour tweaking your character to make them look whatever counts as perfect in your eyes. Everything from prosthetics to makeup, tattoos and piercings, all are on offer here, and the options are rather extensive. Your freshly created character is then thrust straight into the first mission after the opening cinematic, where you'll find yourself facing off against a criminal mastermind and a showdown in a Western-themed saloon. It's insanely over the top, and the introductory mission literally has a hovering jet bounce around a canyon before crash landing. Physics be damned. This intro immediately sets the tone for the rest of the game, and things get definitively more crazy from here on in, but the story ultimately takes a backseat to everything else. Upon completing the intro mission, you return back to your home and meet the rest of your crew. An aspiring DJ, an investor who listens to self-help talks, and a car mechanic. Nina, the mechanic, is probably the standout member of the crew, and she shines quite early on, demonstrating both her driving skills and the ridiculous physics when she rescues you from the police. The missions you then embark on are quite varied, giving the player a decent amount of freedom to choose what they want to do. A lot of the early game, though, focuses on making rent money and getting your crew up to scratch. But once you finally racked up enough cash, the real fun begins. Players will be able to purchase new weapons from any of the weapon shops scattered all over the world of Santo Ileso. These weapons are varied, but don't expect anything as outrageous as the dubstep gun here. It's a bit of a shame because Saints Row as a franchise really leaned into the weirdness and made it its own thing. The lack of zany weaponry here feels like a missed opportunity, and Volition really should have stuck with the insanity a bit more, since it added that secret sauce that Saints Row was known for. Talking of the world in Saints Row, it's massive and there's tons to explore here. Santo Ileso is modelled after the American Southwest and seemingly based on the city of Las Vegas. The entire region is broken up into various districts, and these districts will eventually make up part of your criminal empire as you slowly take them over, one by one. Now, driving through the desert may seem rather lackluster at first, but as you discover new locales, not only do you get some congratulatory messages popping up all over the screen, you also get to take in the sights. There are plenty of over-the-top sights to see in Santo Ileso, and some eye-catching scenery in specific locations. A restaurant in the shape of a giant stegosaurus? Sure, why not? Combine this with the game's downright gorgeous graphics, and there's a lot of enjoyment to be had simply cruising around and listening to the diverse radio stations. Circling back to discussion of the missions, there's a lot of variety, but they all rely on pretty standard open-world game design templates. There are your typical hit-and-run style jobs, car chases, car thefts, collectathons, but that's not to say there are no highlights. A standout encounter involved towing a meth lab halfway across the desert to safely destroy it elsewhere. It was a mission that ended up being a lot more exciting than we thought once enemy forces gave chase at high speeds and we ended up driving off a cliff with the RV in tow. Talking of driving, the physics in Saints Row is quite literally bonkers, with the car able to survive multiple crashes, while even the slightest of bumps using the sideswipe mechanic will send pursuing vehicles careening off the road to the fiery explosive doom. If Volition wanted vehicular madness, they certainly created it here. Unfortunately, many other missions in Saints Row, especially those which involve shooting through waves of enemies, just feel more like a slog than anything else. Thankfully, you can adjust the difficulty to make things easier for you, especially when enemies are swarming you en masse. To offset this rising difficulty, players do however get the ability to unlock some new abilities as they gain XP from missions and activities. You can also make your life a little bit easier by investing in some of the most expensive weapons in the game, but getting to that point, by expanding your business interests in each region you've captured, might put off gamers who lack the patience or time. Saints Row asks you to invest quite a lot of time in it, and for an IP whose primary feature was causing as much mayhem and destruction as possible while pushing the story forward, this reboot feels very subdued. A bland meal without much needed spice. Even more frustrating is that for a game with so much shooting, the aiming feels extremely stiff. Even after playing around with control settings, getting used to the shooting mechanics, it was still a lot more effort than it was worth. Simply running up to enemies and performing takedowns or kicking them in the crotch was infinitely more satisfying than trying to shoot at them through a storm of incoming bullets. Graphically, Saints Row can look great. Character models are highly detailed for the main cast, but they pale in comparison to the environments that often look fantastic. On PS5, and presumably the Xbox Series consoles, there are plenty of resolution settings available, and it can look particularly gorgeous in 4K with HDR enabled. That said, I did notice playing at higher resolution seemed to affect other visual settings somewhat, with plenty of pop invisible as I cruised around Santo Ileso. What was consistently impressive was the weather effects and the day-night cycle that enhanced the visuals, with neon lighting and sandstorms making the whole thing a hell of a lot more atmospheric. The soundtrack on offer in Saints Row was quite varied, and the radio stations have a good selection of tracks to listen to. Cruising around to the sound of synthwave always makes for a very relaxing journey across Santo Ileso. Now, unfortunately, the voice acting, well, presumably meant to be over the top, ventures into the, well, how do you do, fellow kids, meme territory, thanks to the way the characters are written. Now, overall, the Saints Row refresh is a fun game, but it's one that doesn't do enough to set itself apart from the competition. Grand Theft Auto 5 already does a lot of what Saints Row does, and Saints Row honestly felt like we were playing a spruced-up version of Red Faction Guerilla at times, just without the absolute carnage of total environmental destruction attached. Had this game been released 5 years ago, with far more outrageous weaponry, it would probably garner universal praise. In 2022, however, it's just a middling title that some gamers will love, and other gamers will find lacking, which probably means you, Saints Row franchise fans. Given the high AAA retail price, this is a game you'll probably want to wait on a decent discount before picking up.